Hey writers! Today we are talking about common mistakes new writers make when writing their first chapter, plus an entire bonus of how to create a powerful opener. I like to share these tips with all my first editing clients. If you're interested in learning more about flash edits or getting your first chapter edited by a pro, click the link below. Okay, let's dive in. Common mistakes for new writers writing their first chapter. Adding too many adjectives, adverbs, and a plethora of thesaurus words to try to elevate emotion with abstract language, also known as awkward, clumsy, clunky, or convoluted sentences. Basically, you're taking the reader out of your story and into your overworked writing. Since we mentioned adverbs, watch out for these. Redundant adverbs like ran quickly, because running is already done quickly. Also, watch out for adverb dialogue tags like she said quietly or he said loudly. And speaking of dialogue tags, said is not dead. You will scream amateur writer if you try a lottery of dialogue tags like she screamed or he tortuously croaked. Dialogue tags should blend into the background. A reader should not stop during the flow of conversation and notice your clever list of tags. A few sprinkled in your story, totally fine. What to do instead? Use descriptions of body language, emotions, and always use the 5 senses. Moving on. Newbie writer's next challenge. Throwing in a prologue to help explain what you don't otherwise know how to do in chapter 1. 9 times out of 10, you will be advised to work whatever that information is into the next few chapters as exposition. Not sure what exposition means? Well, you are now a writer. You're gonna have to bleed like one. Do your due diligence and learn all the literary terms so you can master your craft. Next newbie mishap? Not filling out a character profile sheet. You should know just about everything about your character. Remember, your character and her backstory are the building blocks for plot points, conflicts, and all that creates chapters. Pro note, never unload all this profile info onto your reader. This is all for you to develop 3-dimensional characters. And keep physical descriptions for the reader to a minimum. In your profile sheet, you can list her almond eyes, her walnut hair, or whatever other nutty descriptions you can think of. But at the end of the day, let the reader use their imagination. If you want to create a powerful character your readers will root for or cry over, click the link below to learn how to create gripping characters. One last tip for characters. Don't take too long to characterize or even introduce the main character. It's your job to connect us to the character so we care about their journey. Most newbies also take too long to introduce dialogue because info dumping is just easier, which it is. Lastly, don't take too long to get to the all-important inciting incident and conflict. What is inciting incident? Okay, I'll give you this one. An inciting incident is an event that hooks the reader into your story. This particular moment is when an event thrusts the protagonist into the main action of the story. For example, Die Hard. Hans and his crew take everyone inside as hostages, except for McClane, of course. This is the inciting moment for one of the best action movies ever made, where we know what's at risk and what he must do. The stakes are raised because there is a time limit before people either get shot or until the safe is finally broken into. This creates suspense and sets the tone. Now that we are talking about the all-important inciting incident, it's time to learn how to create a powerful opening scene. This is your novel's biggest job. Well, and yours. Your primary goal is to set the scene for the inciting incident. What to do first? Start by setting the tone for the inciting incident. Because remember, this will also create a surface problem, also known as external conflict. The inciting incident will then create the story-worthy problem. And that one is more psychological, also known as your internal conflict. Next, introduce the world and character. Notice I don't have this at the very top. Sometimes newbie writers get hung up on this for so long that it becomes 2 pages all about characters and info dumping about their world. Yes, root the reader down early on with who and where, just don't turn it into backstory hell. It's your job to add just enough so the reader grasps what is going on in the inciting incident and why it all matters. But use backstory with care in the opening scene, or even wait to sprinkle it in later. If your inciting incident doesn't happen right away, at least set up your story to tease or hint at some kind of trouble to come. Let's talk a little bit more about backstory. Think about your genre. Historical and fantasy writers usually have the hardest time balancing between too much and not enough. But it's almost always too much. Simplify, condense, and sprinkle in. Also, it must always be relevant to the scene. Let's go back to why backstory and characters sometimes come before the other. In crime thrillers, the murder scene or the backstory usually comes before the protagonist is introduced. If you're writing romance, well, this is where your character comes before the backstory. Fight the need to tell your reader something like this. Bonnie has been married 3 times, each relationship ending badly, to understand why she's looking for a good man. This kind of backstory is important, but can be sprinkled in later on. And to write good characterization, you really have to understand show versus tell, and that's a whole nother video altogether. The last topic we're going to focus on is setting. You see the scene in your head, but you end up not really writing the scene that you see. It becomes overly wordy, still doesn't paint the picture, because you need to always remember you've worked out the scene in your imagination, but the reader has not. So now you need to write it as you imagined it. And don't forget, time period and regions are very important, along with culture and society. But be careful that the details you include are important and meaningful to the plot. If there's a pistol on our nightstand, it better be used in the 3rd scene, or meaningful to characterize the type of girl she is. And to avoid long descriptions that slow everything down, consider sprinkling in descriptions as the actions are happening. Setting descriptions are also world-building tactics, and both can turn into info dumps quickly. Tread with caution. But don't leave out the setting altogether. It will root the reader into your story. Just keep it brief. We haven't talked a lot about the opening line. Your opening line is the most important sentence and paragraph of your life. No pressure. But I want to point out that this could change after you finish your ending. So you always want to write a powerful opener, but then finish your novel. Whenever you go into rewrites, the ending sometimes changes the beginning. All of it will be revised regardless, so don't get hung up on your opener before even completing your whole novel. Otherwise, you'll never get the book done. I'll do another video for powerful first sentence and first paragraphs. And if you have any questions, drop a comment. I'd love to connect. Now dig in with both heels. Keep learning your craft every day, and reach out if you ever need advice from an editor. I'd love to hear what you're working on. Like and subscribe. Cheers.